In 2026, horror fans finally return to one of the most disturbing and psychologically intense worlds ever created in gaming and film. Return to Silent Hill brings audiences back to the fog-covered town that has haunted imaginations for decades. Inspired directly by the legendary video game Silent Hill 2, this new film is not just another horror sequel. It is a deeply emotional story about grief, guilt, memory, and the terrifying power of the human mind. Silent Hill has always been different from other horror franchises. It is not just about monsters chasing people in the dark. It is about what lives inside us. It is about pain that refuses to disappear. The town of Silent Hill does not randomly attack its victims. It calls to them. It forces them to confront their worst memories, their deepest regrets, and the parts of themselves they try to bury. Return to Silent Hill continues this tradition in a powerful and unsettling way. This film follows James Sunderland, a broken man who receives a mysterious letter from his wife Mary, who supposedly died years ago. The letter tells him she is waiting for him in their special place in Silent Hill. Confused, grieving, and desperate for answers, James travels to the abandoned town. What he finds is not comfort. What he finds is a nightmare shaped by his own mind. From the very beginning, Return to Silent Hill sets a heavy and emotional tone. The atmosphere is thick with fog, silence, and dread. The town feels empty, but never safe. Every street corner hides something disturbing. Every sound feels like a warning. The film builds tension slowly, allowing the audience to feel James's isolation and confusion. Instead of relying only on jump scares, the horror comes from uncertainty and emotional weight. One of the most exciting aspects of this 2026 release is the return of director Christoph Gans, who directed the original 2006 Silent Hill film. His visual style is known for being dark, artistic, and faithful to the video game source material. With modern filmmaking technology, this new installment promises to bring even more disturbing imagery and psychological depth to the screen. Return to Silent Hill is not just for longtime fans of the franchise. While it honors the original game and earlier films, it also works as a standalone story. Anyone who enjoys psychological horror, mystery, and emotionally driven storytelling can connect with it. At its core, this is a story about a man facing the truth about himself. The monsters are terrifying, but the real horror lies in what James slowly discovers about his past. The film also introduces iconic creatures that fans recognize, including the terrifying Pyramid Head. But these monsters are not random villains. Each one represents something meaningful within James's psyche. They are physical forms of guilt, anger, punishment, and emotional pain. That is what makes Silent Hill unique. The horror is symbolic, not just physical. Another key element of the introduction is the emotional mystery. Is Mary truly alive? Is the letter real? Or is James losing his grip on reality? The audience experiences the story through James's perspective, which means we question everything alongside him. This creates a powerful psychological experience where reality feels unstable and unsafe. Return to Silent Hill aims to blend emotional storytelling with disturbing horror visuals. It explores themes of love, loss, denial, and self-destruction. Instead of simply trying to scare the audience, the film wants to disturb them on a deeper level. It wants viewers to think long after the credits roll. As we begin this journey back into the fog, one thing is clear: Silent Hill is not just a place. It is a reflection of the soul. And in 2026, that reflection becomes more haunting than ever before. Return to Silent Hill is a 2026 psychological horror film directed by Christoph Gans. This movie marks his return to the Silent Hill universe after directing the first Silent Hill film in 2006. Unlike the 2012 sequel, this installment serves as a fresh adaptation inspired mainly by the popular video game Silent Hill 2, which many fans consider the strongest story in the entire franchise. The film aims to stay closer to the emotional and psychological themes of the game while presenting a cinematic experience designed for modern audiences. The movie is produced through an international collaboration, combining European and American production companies. This global partnership allows the film to maintain a distinct artistic tone while also appealing to mainstream viewers. The screenplay is written with a focus on character depth, emotional trauma, and psychological horror rather than relying only on action or traditional scare tactics. The creators have stated that this adaptation respects the source material while making adjustments necessary for film storytelling. Jeremy Irvine plays the lead character, James Sunderland. James is a grieving husband who receives a mysterious letter from his wife Mary, who supposedly passed away years earlier. The letter asks him to meet her in Silent Hill, a town filled with painful memories. Irvine's casting brings a serious dramatic presence to the role, emphasizing the emotional weight carried by the character. Opposite him, Hannah Emily Anderson plays Mary and Maria, two roles that are central to the psychological complexity of the story. The dual casting reflects the layered narrative that Silent Hill is known for. The film belongs primarily to the psychological horror genre, but it also includes strong elements of mystery and drama. It is not a fast-paced action horror movie. Instead, it focuses on atmosphere, tension, and emotional storytelling. The runtime is expected to be around 2 hours, allowing the narrative to unfold gradually. This slower pacing helps build dread and allows the audience to connect deeply with James's journey. Return to Silent Hill is rated for mature audiences due to disturbing imagery, violent sequences, and heavy psychological themes. Like the original game, the film deals with topics such as grief, guilt, mental trauma, and personal responsibility. The horror elements are intense but meaningful. Every creature and terrifying moment connects directly to the emotional state of the main character. Filming locations include detailed studio sets designed to recreate the fog-covered streets and decaying buildings of Silent Hill. The production team focused heavily on practical effects, combined with modern visual technology, to bring the town and its monsters to life. The goal was to avoid an over-reliance on computer-generated imagery and instead create a grounded, realistic horror atmosphere. This approach helps preserve the unsettling mood that fans expect. The musical score plays a significant role in the film's identity. The soundtrack is inspired by the haunting compositions associated with the Silent Hill franchise. Music in this universe is never just background noise. It builds emotional tension and supports the psychological themes of isolation and despair. The sound design includes disturbing industrial tones, distant echoes, and eerie silence, all carefully crafted to immerse the audience in the nightmare world. Marketing for the film highlights its loyalty to Silent Hill 2. Promotional material emphasizes the emotional love story at the center of the horror. Rather than presenting the movie as only a monster film, the campaign focuses on the mystery of Mary's letter and James's desperate search for answers. This strategy targets both longtime fans and new viewers who appreciate character-driven horror stories. The 2026 release date places the film in a modern cinematic landscape where audiences expect high production quality and thoughtful storytelling. Psychological horror has gained renewed popularity in recent years, and Return to Silent Hill fits within that trend. It aims to combine artistic filmmaking with unsettling imagery, delivering a story that is both terrifying and emotionally powerful. In summary, Return to Silent Hill is a character-focused psychological horror film directed by Christoph Gans and starring Jeremy Irvine and Hannah Emily Anderson. Inspired by Silent Hill 2, it blends mystery, emotional drama, and disturbing horror. With a strong emphasis on atmosphere, practical effects, and meaningful storytelling, the movie seeks to honor the legacy of the franchise while introducing a new generation to the nightmare hidden within the fog. Return to Silent Hill begins with the quiet and emotionally shattered life of James Sunderland, portrayed by Jeremy Irvine. James has been living in deep isolation since the death of his wife, Mary. Their marriage once held warmth and affection, but Mary's long illness slowly replaced love with exhaustion, frustration, and emotional distance. Years after her passing, James remains stuck in grief, unable to truly move forward. His days feel empty, and his nights are filled with fading memories of a woman he both loved and resented. One day, everything changes. James receives a letter addressed in Mary's handwriting. The letter is simple but impossible. Mary writes that she is waiting for him in their special place in Silent Hill. The message shakes James to his core. Mary is dead. He saw her die. Yet the handwriting is unmistakable. The tone feels personal. The words feel real. Confused, desperate, and clinging to the smallest hope that she may somehow still be alive, James decides to travel to Silent Hill, a once peaceful resort town where they shared meaningful memories. As James drives toward the town, the atmosphere shifts. The sky grows gray. The road becomes empty. A thick wall of fog appears as he approaches Silent Hill. When he finally arrives, the town looks abandoned. Buildings are damaged and decaying. Rust covers metal surfaces. The streets are silent except for the distant sound of wind. The heavy fog limits visibility, making every step feel uncertain. The town does not feel empty in a normal way. It feels like something is watching. James begins exploring, calling out Mary's name. There is no answer. Instead, he hears faint noises echoing through alleyways and inside buildings. As he walks deeper into the town, he sees shadowy figures moving in the distance. Soon he encounters his first creature. The monster is humanoid but twisted, with distorted limbs and a faceless head wrapped in skin-like material. Its movements are slow yet disturbing. James reacts with fear and confusion. He does not understand what is happening, but survival forces him to defend himself. The horror escalates as more creatures appear. Some crawl across the ground. Others stagger toward him with unnatural posture. The monsters seem less like random beings and more like physical representations of something deeply wrong. The town itself begins to shift between normal decay and a darker, rust-covered version filled with metal grates and blood-stained walls. This transformation suggests that Silent Hill exists on multiple layers of reality. While searching an apartment complex, James meets Angela Orozco. Angela appears frightened and emotionally fragile. She is searching for her mother, though her story feels unclear and filled with pain. Angela speaks in a distant and uneasy tone, as if she is trapped in her own trauma. She warns James that the town is dangerous but continues on her own path. Her presence suggests that Silent Hill has drawn others who carry emotional scars. As James continues his search, he begins experiencing flashbacks of Mary during her illness. These memories reveal the strain their relationship endured. Mary was once vibrant and loving, but her sickness confined her to a hospital bed. Over time, she grew angry and depressed. James, overwhelmed by caretaking and helplessness, became emotionally withdrawn. These glimpses into the past create tension between sympathy and doubt. James loved Mary, but something about his memories feels incomplete. Inside a school building, James experiences one of the town's violent shifts into its darker form. Sirens echo loudly, and the environment transforms into a nightmarish version of itself. Metal fences seal exits. The walls rot before his eyes. It becomes clear that Silent Hill is not simply abandoned. It is alive in a disturbing way. The town responds to James's presence. During his journey through a hospital, James meets Eddie Dombrowski. Eddie appears nervous and awkward, hiding in a room with signs of violence nearby. He speaks about being bullied and humiliated in his past. At first, he seems harmless, but there is a quiet anger behind his words. Eddie laughs at inappropriate moments, suggesting emotional instability. Like Angela, Eddie is not in Silent Hill by chance. The town has summoned him for a reason. Part 1 closes with James standing in the fog-covered streets once more, surrounded by uncertainty. The letter remains in his pocket. He continues calling Mary's name, driven by love, guilt, and confusion. The town grows darker with each step. The deeper he travels into Silent Hill, the clearer it becomes that this journey is not just about finding Mary. It is about confronting something buried deep within himself. As James Sunderland continues his search through Silent Hill, the town becomes more aggressive and deeply personal. The fog feels heavier, almost suffocating, as if the air itself carries judgment. The streets twist in unnatural ways, leading him in circles. Every building he enters reveals disturbing imagery that feels symbolic rather than random. Hospital beds are stained and abandoned. Wheelchairs sit empty in narrow hallways. Mirrors reflect distorted versions of his face. It slowly becomes clear that Silent Hill is not simply haunted. It is reacting to James. Inside Rosewater Park, James encounters Maria for the first time. She is played by Hannah Emily Anderson, who also portrays Mary. Maria looks almost exactly like his late wife, yet her personality is entirely different. She dresses boldly, speaks confidently, and shows emotional intensity that Mary rarely expressed during her illness. James is shocked. He asks her questions about their past, but she denies knowing him. Still, she shows unusual interest in him, almost as if she understands his loneliness. Her presence confuses and tempts him. She feels like a second chance. Maria chooses to travel with James through the town. As they move together, her flirtatious nature contrasts with the painful memories James carries of Mary's sickness. Maria laughs, touches his arm, and encourages him to forget the past. At times, she seems protective. At other times, she appears manipulative. James begins to rely on her companionship, even though something feels unnatural about her existence. The horror intensifies when Pyramid Head appears more frequently. This towering figure, wearing a massive metal pyramid helmet and dragging an enormous blade, stalks James without speaking. Unlike other creatures, Pyramid Head moves with purpose. He does not attack randomly. Instead, he appears during moments of emotional revelation or guilt. His presence feels symbolic, like an executioner waiting for judgment to be accepted. In a terrifying scene inside an apartment building, Pyramid Head violently attacks other monsters in front of James. The act is brutal and disturbing, yet strangely ritualistic. It suggests that Pyramid Head is not simply hunting James. He is enforcing something. Maria is later attacked and killed by Pyramid Head in front of James, leaving him devastated. Her death feels deeply personal. James screams in anguish, as if losing Mary all over again. However, Maria returns later in the story, alive and unharmed. She acts as though nothing happened. James is confused but chooses to ignore the impossibility. This cycle repeats. Maria dies again in a different location, only to reappear once more. Each death becomes more violent. Each return becomes more unsettling. The pattern suggests that Maria is not a real person but a manifestation of James's desire, guilt, and denial. She represents the version of Mary he wished existed during her illness, free from suffering and resentment. Meanwhile, Eddie's mental state collapses. James discovers that Eddie has begun killing people in Silent Hill, claiming they deserved it for mocking him. Eddie's anger, once hidden behind nervous laughter, turns into open rage. In a cold and abandoned meat locker, James confronts him. The conversation reveals Eddie's belief that everyone judges him. The town has amplified his paranoia and hatred. In the end, James is forced to defend himself, resulting in Eddie's death. This moment shakes James deeply. Taking another life forces him to reflect on his own buried actions. Angela's story also reaches a tragic turning point. James finds her in a burning staircase inside what appears to be her version of Silent Hill. Flames surround her, but she does not react in fear. Instead, she speaks about abuse and suffering from her past. The fire represents her personal hell, shaped by trauma. When James tries to help her, she rejects him gently, saying that this is something she must face alone. She walks upward into the flames, leaving James with a sense of helplessness. As James approaches the Lakeview Hotel, the location mentioned in Mary's letter, the environment becomes eerily calm. The hotel appears intact at first, almost normal compared to the rest of the town. Soft music plays faintly in the background. The calmness feels deceptive. Inside the hotel, James finds items from his past, including photographs and personal belongings. Memories return more clearly now. The line between reality and illusion begins to collapse. In a quiet room, James discovers a videotape labeled with his name. His hands shake as he inserts it into an old videotape player. What he sees changes everything. The footage reveals that Mary did not simply die from illness. Overwhelmed by her suffering and his emotional exhaustion, James suffocated her with a pillow while she lay in bed. The act was not driven by hatred but by despair and weakness. He could not endure watching her suffer, but he also could not handle his own frustration. The truth shatters his denial. The letter was never real. Silent Hill did not call him to reunite with Mary. It called him to face what he had done. The monsters, the shifting town, Pyramid Head, and Maria were all manifestations of his guilt. The executioner has been guiding him toward acceptance. Part 2 ends with James falling to his knees in the hotel room, overwhelmed by grief and self-realization. The fog outside the window thickens once more, as if waiting for his final decision. Part 3 begins in the quiet aftermath of James's horrifying discovery inside the Lakeview Hotel. The videotape has exposed the truth he buried deep within his mind. Mary did not simply fade away from illness. James ended her life. The weight of that memory crashes down on him all at once. He can no longer hide behind denial or false hope. The letter that brought him to Silent Hill was never real. It was a creation of his guilt, a final attempt by his mind to avoid responsibility. As James leaves the hotel room, the building begins to change. The calm version of the hotel decays rapidly. Wallpaper peels away to reveal rusted metal underneath. The floors rot and collapse into darkness. The transformation reflects the collapse of James's illusions. There is no safe version of Silent Hill left. There is only the truth. Maria appears one last time in the hallway. This time she looks different. Her tone is colder, more accusing. She reminds James that Mary was difficult, angry, and distant during her illness. She suggests that he suffered too, that he deserved freedom from the burden. Maria tries to convince him that what he did was understandable. She offers him a choice: stay with her and forget the painful truth, or fully accept responsibility and lose her forever. In that moment, Maria represents pure temptation. She is not Mary. She is James's wish to escape guilt. James refuses her. For the first time, he speaks with clarity. He admits that he killed Mary, not only because she was suffering, but because he was weak. He confesses that part of him wanted his life back. This honest acknowledgement breaks Maria's hold over him. Her expression shifts from seductive to furious. The illusion fades and she disappears. Immediately after, James faces his final confrontation with Pyramid Head. This time, there are two executioners standing before him. Their presence feels ceremonial rather than aggressive. They do not rush toward him. Instead, they wait. James realizes that Pyramid Head was never there to kill him randomly. The creature existed to punish him until he accepted the truth. Now that he has confessed, the role of executioner is complete. In a powerful and symbolic moment, the two Pyramid Heads drive their massive blades into the ground and destroy themselves. Their helmets crack open, and their bodies collapse. The executioners are no longer needed. James has judged himself. After their destruction, the environment grows quiet. The sirens that once signaled the shift into darkness stop echoing. The fog outside begins to thin slightly. James walks slowly through the broken hotel and eventually reaches the lakeside. There, he imagines one final conversation with Mary. Unlike Maria, this version of Mary is calm and sincere. She does not appear angry. She speaks softly, expressing that she understands his pain, even if she cannot fully forgive his actions. This moment feels less like a supernatural event and more like James finally forgiving himself enough to move forward. The ending of Return to Silent Hill remains emotionally complex and open to interpretation. In one possible conclusion, James walks into the fog alone, leaving the town behind. His face carries deep sadness but also acceptance. He understands what he did and chooses to live with that truth rather than hide from it. The fog clears slightly as he drives away, symbolizing a fragile chance at redemption. In another interpretation, James remains by the lake, overwhelmed by guilt that he cannot escape. The weight of his actions becomes too heavy, and Silent Hill claims him completely. The town exists as a personal purgatory, trapping those who cannot forgive themselves. The film does not give a single clear answer. Instead, it allows viewers to reflect on what acceptance truly means. Angela and Eddie's fates serve as dark reflections of James's journey. Angela could not escape her trauma and walked willingly into her personal hell. Eddie allowed his anger to control him and paid the price. James stands at a crossroads between destruction and acceptance. Silent Hill did not judge him randomly. It forced him to face himself. The final shots of the film focus on the empty streets of Silent Hill. The fog still lingers. The town remains silent, waiting for the next lost soul carrying unbearable guilt. The message is clear. Silent Hill is not just a physical location. It is a psychological space where hidden truths surface. It exists wherever guilt, grief, and denial grow strong enough to create their own monsters. Return to Silent Hill closes on a somber note. It is not a story about defeating evil. It is a story about confronting it within yourself. James's journey shows that the most terrifying monsters are not the ones with distorted bodies or giant blades. They are the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. The screen fades to gray as the sound of distant wind echoes one final time, leaving the audience unsettled, reflective, and emotionally shaken. Return to Silent Hill follows a carefully layered narrative structure that mirrors the psychological breakdown of its main character, James Sunderland. The film is not built like a traditional horror story driven only by external threats. Instead, its structure is deeply connected to James's internal journey. The pacing, reveals, and turning points are designed to slowly uncover truth while maintaining emotional tension. The story follows a three-act structure, but each act blends reality with psychological distortion. In the first act, the setup is simple yet mysterious. James receives the impossible letter from Mary and travels to Silent Hill. This inciting incident pushes the narrative forward. The audience shares James's confusion. The town is introduced as abandoned, fog-covered, and unnatural. Early monster encounters establish danger, but they also raise questions. Why are these creatures here? Why does the town feel personal rather than random? The first act focuses heavily on atmosphere and isolation. The narrative flow is slow and deliberate. Instead of rushing into constant action, the film allows quiet moments to build unease. Long shots of empty streets, distant sounds, and minimal dialogue create tension. This pacing reflects James's emotional numbness. He is not panicking wildly. He is moving forward in a daze, driven by fragile hope. The first turning point occurs when he meets Maria. Her appearance shifts the story from simple mystery into psychological conflict. The second act deepens the complexity. Here, the narrative begins weaving together multiple character arcs. Angela and Eddie are introduced not just as side characters but as mirrors of James. Their stories unfold in fragments, appearing and disappearing throughout the town. The structure uses repetition intentionally. Locations transform between normal decay and nightmarish versions. Maria dies and reappears. Pyramid Head stalks James multiple times. These repeated patterns are not random plot devices. They represent cycles of guilt and denial. The midpoint of the film arrives with Maria's repeated deaths and the realization that something about her existence is unnatural. This creates emotional instability in the narrative. The audience begins questioning what is real. The town's shifting environments accelerate in frequency. Sirens signal transitions into darker realms. Each transformation acts like a psychological trigger, moving James closer to buried memories. The pacing during the second act alternates between quiet exploration and sudden violence. This rhythm keeps viewers emotionally off balance. Just when the story seems calm, a disturbing encounter disrupts it. For example, the confrontation with Eddie in the meat locker is not only violent but emotionally revealing. This scene acts as a secondary turning point. James is forced to take a life, forcing him to reflect on his own hidden actions. The narrative flow tightens here, moving steadily toward the truth. Angela's staircase scene also serves as a structural milestone. Her choice to walk into the flames represents what happens when someone cannot escape trauma. This moment contrasts with James's journey, highlighting that he still has a choice. The film uses these parallel arcs to enrich the central storyline without distracting from it. The third act begins when James reaches the Lakeview Hotel. Structurally, this location serves as the emotional center of the film. The hotel is that special place mentioned in the letter, so narratively it represents resolution. However, the calm appearance of the hotel delays the final reveal. This temporary quiet creates suspense. The audience senses that something major is coming. The discovery of the videotape acts as the climax. It is the ultimate narrative reveal. Everything before this moment builds toward it. The monsters, Maria's existence, Pyramid Head's role, and the shifting town suddenly make sense. The structure rewards patience. Rather than relying on surprise for shock value, the film uses revelation for emotional impact. After the truth is exposed, the narrative enters its final confrontation phase. James faces Maria and then Pyramid Head. These scenes are less about physical survival and more about psychological acceptance. The destruction of Pyramid Head symbolizes the completion of James's internal trial. The resolution that follows is intentionally ambiguous. The film allows multiple interpretations of James's fate, maintaining the franchise's tradition of layered endings. Overall, the narrative flow of Return to Silent Hill is deliberate, symbolic, and emotionally driven. It balances mystery with revelation, repetition with progression, and horror with introspection. Every structural choice reflects James's mental state. The story does not simply move forward in a straight line. It spirals inward, forcing both the character and the audience to confront uncomfortable truths. Return to Silent Hill is deeply driven by character development rather than traditional horror action. Every major figure in the story represents a different emotional struggle, and each arc is carefully shaped to reflect the central theme of guilt and trauma. The most important transformation belongs to James Sunderland, but the supporting characters also play essential roles in shaping the psychological journey. James Sunderland begins the film as a broken and emotionally numb man. Jeremy Irvine portrays him with quiet restraint. At the start, James is not searching for redemption. He is searching for comfort. The mysterious letter from Mary gives him a reason to believe that his pain might be undone. His early behavior shows denial. He avoids fully speaking about Mary's death. He clings to hope even when the situation becomes clearly unnatural. This stage of his arc represents emotional repression. He has buried the truth so deeply that even he does not consciously recognize it. As James moves deeper into Silent Hill, his emotional state begins to crack. The monsters he encounters symbolize parts of himself he refuses to face. Pyramid Head represents punishment and judgment. Maria represents temptation and denial. Each encounter forces James closer to self-awareness. His arc shifts from confusion to confrontation. By the midpoint of the film, his confidence weakens. He becomes more desperate, more reactive. His repeated loss of Maria intensifies his internal struggle. Every time she dies, it mirrors his loss of Mary, but it also reminds him that something is wrong with his perception. The turning point in James's character arc occurs when he watches the videotape in the hotel. This moment transforms him from a man seeking answers into a man facing truth. He can no longer blame fate or illness. He must confront his own action. What makes his arc powerful is that he does not collapse into complete madness like Eddie, nor does he surrender to despair like Angela. Instead, he reaches acceptance. In the final confrontation, he openly admits his guilt. This acceptance destroys Pyramid Head and ends the cycle of punishment. James evolves from denial to painful honesty. Maria's character functions as a psychological extension of James. Played by Hannah Emily Anderson, Maria is not simply another woman in the story. She is a reflection of James's desires and regrets. At first, she appears confident, lively, and affectionate. She embodies the version of Mary that James wishes existed during her illness. Her flirtatious personality contrasts with the sick and distant Mary seen in flashbacks. However, Maria's repeated deaths reveal her instability. She is not meant to survive. She exists only to test James's attachment to illusion. In the final act, when she tempts him to reject the truth, her character arc completes its purpose. She fades once James chooses reality over fantasy. Mary, though absent for most of the present timeline, experiences development through flashbacks. At first, she is remembered as loving and warm. Gradually, her illness reshapes those memories. She becomes frustrated, angry, and emotionally unpredictable. These memories complicate the audience's understanding of their marriage. Mary is not portrayed as a villain. She is a woman suffering deeply. Her arc exists in fragments, but it reveals the pressure placed on both partners. In the final imagined conversation, she appears calm and forgiving, symbolizing James's emotional closure. Angela Orozco represents unresolved trauma. Her arc is tragic and linear. From her first appearance, she seems fragile and disconnected. As pieces of her backstory are revealed, it becomes clear that she has suffered abuse. Silent Hill manifests her pain as fire and decay. Unlike James, Angela cannot detach from her trauma long enough to process it. Her final decision to walk into the flames shows surrender. Her arc demonstrates what happens when guilt and suffering are not confronted with acceptance. Eddie Dombrowski's arc moves in the opposite direction of James. Eddie begins as nervous and awkward, seemingly harmless. However, as the town influences him, his buried anger surfaces. He becomes violent and paranoid. Instead of reflecting on his pain, he justifies his rage. His final confrontation with James reveals how deeply he believes the world has wronged him. Eddie's refusal to accept responsibility leads to his death. His arc serves as a warning parallel to James's journey. Together, these character arcs create a layered psychological narrative. Each person in Silent Hill represents a different response to trauma: denial, surrender, rage, and acceptance. James's transformation stands at the center, but it gains meaning through contrast. Return to Silent Hill succeeds because it treats horror not as random terror, but as emotional consequence. Return to Silent Hill relies heavily on performance to deliver its psychological weight. Unlike action-driven horror films, this story demands emotional subtlety and internal conflict. The actors must communicate guilt, denial, fear, and grief, often without long speeches. The success of the film depends on whether the audience believes the emotional struggle at its center. Fortunately, the performances anchor the story in a grounded and human reality. Jeremy Irvine, as James Sunderland, carries the film almost entirely on his shoulders. His performance is restrained and deeply internal. From the opening scenes, Irvine presents James as emotionally drained. His posture is slightly slouched, his voice soft and hesitant. He does not overplay grief. Instead, he portrays a man who has been living with silent pain for years. This subtle approach makes the later emotional breakdown more powerful. As the story progresses, Irvine slowly shifts James's behavior. His breathing becomes heavier during confrontations. His voice cracks when Maria dies. By the time he discovers the videotape, his performance transforms into raw vulnerability. The moment he realizes he killed Mary is not exaggerated with loud screaming. Instead, it is filled with quiet devastation. That restraint makes the scene feel real and heartbreaking. Hannah Emily Anderson delivers one of the most complex performances in the film by portraying both Mary and Maria. As Mary in flashbacks, she appears physically weak but emotionally layered. She captures the frustration of long-term illness without turning the character into a stereotype. Her Mary feels human, sometimes loving and sometimes bitter. The tension between vulnerability and anger adds depth to James's memories. As Maria, Anderson shifts completely. Her body language becomes confident and expressive. Her tone is playful yet slightly manipulative. The contrast between the two roles is subtle but clear. Maria feels like an exaggerated version of Mary, shaped by James's desires. Anderson's ability to balance these dual identities is crucial to the film's psychological impact. The supporting cast adds further emotional weight. The actress portraying Angela Orozco gives a fragile and haunting performance. Angela speaks softly, often avoiding eye contact. Her pauses between sentences feel natural, as if she is carefully choosing what to reveal. In the staircase scene surrounded by flames, her performance becomes especially powerful. She does not scream or panic. Instead, she speaks with tired acceptance. That quiet surrender makes her final moments deeply unsettling. Her portrayal captures the exhaustion of someone who has lived with trauma for too long. The actor playing Eddie Dombrowski presents a gradual transformation from awkward victim to unstable aggressor. Early in the film, Eddie's nervous laughter and uneasy posture create sympathy. However, subtle shifts in his facial expressions hint at deeper anger. During the meat locker confrontation, his performance turns intense. His eyes show paranoia and resentment. He speaks about being mocked and judged, and his voice carries bitterness rather than fear. This change feels believable because it builds slowly. The actor avoids making Eddie a cartoon villain. Instead, he portrays a man consumed by resentment. Even the nonverbal presence of Pyramid Head deserves mention in performance analysis. Though hidden beneath a massive helmet, the physical actor inside the costume conveys menace through posture and controlled movement. The slow dragging of the blade, the deliberate steps, and the stillness during key scenes create an imposing presence. Pyramid Head feels purposeful rather than chaotic. This physical performance strengthens the symbolic nature of the character. Another important aspect of the acting is how characters respond to silence. Many scenes rely on minimal dialogue. Long pauses, distant sounds, and facial reactions carry emotional meaning. Jeremy Irvine especially excels in these moments. His reactions to the environment, such as staring at distorted reflections or hesitating before entering dark rooms, make the psychological horror feel personal. Chemistry between actors also plays a significant role. The dynamic between James and Maria feels intentionally unbalanced. Maria often leans closer, invades personal space, or touches James unexpectedly. Irvine responds with discomfort and confusion. This contrast visually reinforces the idea that Maria is an emotional projection rather than a stable partner. Overall, the performances in Return to Silent Hill elevate the material beyond simple horror. The actors treat the story as a drama shaped by trauma. Their restraint, emotional honesty, and gradual transformations allow the psychological themes to resonate deeply. Without strong acting, the symbolic horror could feel distant. Instead, the performances ensure that every monster and every revelation connects directly to human emotion. Return to Silent Hill reflects a very deliberate and controlled directorial vision. Christoph Gans approaches the film not as a simple horror sequel, but as a psychological tragedy wrapped inside a nightmare. His direction focuses on atmosphere, symbolism, and emotional weight rather than fast scares or flashy action. Every creative decision, from camera placement to pacing, feels guided by a clear understanding of what Silent Hill represents. One of the strongest elements of Gans' direction is restraint. He does not rush the story. Instead, he allows scenes to breathe. Long stretches of silence dominate the early part of the film. Fog-covered streets are shown in wide shots that emphasize isolation. James often appears small within the frame, visually reinforcing his loneliness and emotional vulnerability. This visual language shows that the town is bigger and more powerful than he is. Gans uses space to communicate psychology. The director also shows deep respect for the source material. While adapting the story of Silent Hill 2, he preserves its emotional core. The film does not treat monsters as random threats. Instead, Gans frames them as manifestations of guilt and trauma. Pyramid Head is introduced slowly, often appearing at a distance before fully confronting James. The camera lingers on his silhouette, allowing tension to build naturally. This patient introduction makes the character feel symbolic and mythic rather than simply frightening. Gans carefully balances realism and surrealism. In many scenes, the town looks grounded and physically believable. Buildings are damaged but recognizable. Streets resemble real abandoned locations. Then, without warning, the environment shifts into a rusted and nightmarish version of itself. The transitions are not chaotic. They are controlled and almost ritualistic, often signaled by distant sirens. This structured transformation reinforces the idea that Silent Hill operates under its own psychological rules. Another key aspect of the direction is emotional focus. Even during violent or disturbing moments, the camera often stays close to James's face. Rather than showing excessive gore, Gans prioritizes reaction. For example, when Maria dies, the emphasis is not only on the attack itself but on James's devastation. The horror becomes emotional rather than purely visual. This choice aligns with the film's central theme that the true terror lies within the character's mind. Gans also demonstrates strong control over tone. The film never feels inconsistent. From beginning to end, there is a heavy and somber atmosphere. Even moments of temporary calm, such as inside the Lakeview Hotel before its transformation, carry an underlying tension. The director avoids comedic relief or unnecessary distractions. This commitment to tone ensures that the audience remains emotionally engaged. Symbolism plays a major role in his vision. Fire surrounding Angela, cold industrial spaces around Eddie, and water near the hotel all reflect internal struggles. Gans uses visual metaphors rather than direct explanation. He trusts the audience to interpret what they see. This approach elevates the film beyond surface-level horror and invites deeper analysis. The pacing decisions further reflect careful direction. The first act moves slowly to establish mystery. The second act increases tension through repetition and escalation. By the third act, the narrative tightens, leading directly to the videotape revelation and final confrontation. This gradual build mirrors James's psychological unraveling. The structure feels intentional rather than accidental. Gans also understands the importance of silence. Many horror directors rely heavily on loud musical cues to signal danger. In Return to Silent Hill, silence often creates more discomfort than sound. The absence of noise forces the audience to focus on subtle movements and distant echoes. This technique strengthens immersion. Perhaps most importantly, Gans maintains emotional seriousness. He treats James's confession not as a shocking twist for entertainment, but as a tragic moment of self-realization. The direction ensures that the reveal feels earned. Everything leading up to it supports the emotional climax. Overall, Christoph Gans' direction in Return to Silent Hill reflects a unified and mature vision. He blends psychological horror with emotional storytelling, maintaining visual consistency and thematic depth. His careful pacing, symbolic imagery, and focus on character ensure that the film feels cohesive and purposeful. The result is a haunting experience guided by clear artistic intention. The cinematography of Return to Silent Hill plays a central role in shaping its psychological impact. The film does not rely only on story or dialogue to create tension. Instead, the camera itself becomes a storytelling tool. Through framing, lighting, color palettes, and movement, the visual style reflects James Sunderland's emotional state and reinforces the haunting atmosphere of the town. One of the most noticeable visual elements is the heavy use of fog. The fog is not just a background effect. It controls visibility, limits perspective, and creates uncertainty. Cinematographers use wide shots where James appears small and isolated within endless gray space. This visual choice emphasizes loneliness and vulnerability. The fog often swallows entire streets, making it impossible to see what lies ahead. That visual obstruction mirrors James's mental confusion and denial. Lighting plays a powerful role in defining mood. The early exterior scenes are lit with soft, diffused gray tones. Natural light feels muted, as if the sun barely reaches the town. Shadows are not sharp but blended into the environment. This creates a dreamlike quality. As the story progresses and Silent Hill shifts into its darker form, lighting becomes harsher and more directional. Stark contrasts appear between bright highlights and deep shadows. Flashing siren lights introduce aggressive red tones, transforming calm spaces into threatening environments. Color grading further enhances the emotional tone. The primary palette is dominated by cold grays, faded greens, and washed-out blues. These colors create a sense of decay and lifelessness. When rust and blood appear in the alternate dimension, the palette shifts toward deep reds and dark browns. This transition is visually shocking because it interrupts the muted atmosphere established earlier. The red tones symbolize violence, guilt, and internal torment. Camera movement is deliberate and controlled. Slow tracking shots follow James as he walks through empty streets or narrow hallways. These steady movements build tension gradually rather than through sudden jolts. The camera often lingers behind him, placing the audience in a position of uneasy observation. At times, it shifts to handheld movement during moments of panic, increasing immediacy and instability. This contrast between smooth and unstable shots reflects James's emotional shifts. Framing choices also reinforce themes. James is frequently positioned off-center in the frame, surrounded by negative space. This composition creates discomfort. It suggests imbalance and vulnerability. Doorways, fences, and window frames are often used to visually trap him within confined spaces. In contrast, wide shots of the lake and open roads create temporary breathing room, though even those spaces feel empty rather than safe. The design of interior locations adds another layer to the visual storytelling. The hospital scenes are lit with flickering fluorescent lights, casting pale reflections on cracked tiles. Long corridors stretch into darkness, creating visual depth that suggests unknown danger. In the apartment complex, peeling wallpaper and stained carpets add texture and realism. The camera frequently glides slowly through these spaces, inviting viewers to absorb every unsettling detail. The transformation sequences are particularly striking from a cinematography standpoint. When the town shifts into its industrial nightmare version, the lighting changes dramatically. Warm tones disappear, replaced by cold metallic reflections and glowing embers. The camera often tilts slightly or lowers its angle during these sequences, subtly altering perspective. This technique creates a subconscious feeling of instability without relying on extreme visual distortion. Close-ups are used sparingly but effectively. When James experiences emotional breakthroughs, the camera moves closer to his face. These moments allow the audience to see subtle changes in expression. Tears, trembling lips, and distant stares communicate inner conflict without words. By contrast, Pyramid Head is often filmed in wide or low-angle shots, making him appear larger and more imposing. This visual contrast between intimacy and dominance reinforces the power imbalance between James and his guilt. Reflections and mirrors are another important visual motif. Throughout the film, James sees distorted reflections of himself in broken mirrors and dark windows. These images symbolize fractured identity. The cinematography emphasizes these moments by adjusting focus and depth of field, drawing attention to visual distortion. Overall, the cinematography and visual style of Return to Silent Hill are carefully crafted to serve the psychological narrative. Every lighting choice, camera angle, and color decision contributes to the emotional experience. The visuals do not simply present horror. They embody it. Through controlled framing, atmospheric lighting, and symbolic imagery, the film creates a haunting world that feels both surreal and deeply personal. Editing plays a crucial role in shaping the psychological intensity of Return to Silent Hill. Unlike fast-cut horror films that rely on rapid transitions and sudden shocks, this movie uses deliberate, measured editing to build emotional weight. The pacing is carefully structured to reflect James Sunderland's internal state. Every cut, transition, and sequence length feels intentional, supporting the slow unraveling of truth rather than distracting from it. From the opening scenes, the editing establishes a calm but unsettling rhythm. Shots linger longer than audiences might expect. The drive towards Silent Hill unfolds with extended takes of empty roads and distant fog. This slower pace allows tension to build gradually. Instead of overwhelming viewers with immediate danger, the film creates anticipation. The audience has time to absorb the atmosphere, which makes later horror moments more impactful. Continuity editing is used effectively to maintain immersion. As James explores streets and buildings, the transitions between spaces feel natural and fluid. The audience follows his physical journey without confusion. However, when Silent Hill shifts into its darker dimension, the editing becomes more fragmented. Cuts grow slightly sharper and transitions feel more abrupt. These changes are subtle but noticeable. They mirror the instability of James's mind and the shifting reality around him. The film avoids excessive cross-cutting. Instead of jumping constantly between different characters, it stays primarily focused on James. This editorial choice strengthens the personal nature of the story. When Angela or Eddie appear, their scenes are integrated smoothly into James's journey rather than treated as separate storylines. This keeps the narrative cohesive and prevents emotional distraction. Flashbacks are handled with careful timing. Memories of Mary are not presented randomly. They appear during moments when James encounters symbolic triggers, such as hospital environments or emotional confrontations. The transitions into flashbacks are often softened with subtle visual or audio cues. This prevents the film from feeling disjointed. The editing ensures that past and present blend in a way that reflects how trauma surfaces unexpectedly. One of the most effective editorial techniques is the use of repetition. Maria's deaths and reappearances are edited in a way that feels cyclical. Each death is shown clearly, allowing the emotional impact to land. When she returns later, the cut back to her presence is calm rather than dramatic. This contrast increases unease. The editing does not treat her return as a shocking twist. Instead, it presents it as quietly disturbing, forcing viewers to question reality. The pacing of tension is also carefully controlled. Horror scenes are not stacked one after another. After an intense encounter, such as a confrontation with Pyramid Head, the film often slows down. Quiet exploration follows violence. This breathing space prevents emotional fatigue. It also allows the audience to process what happened. The balance between high tension and quiet reflection keeps the experience engaging without becoming overwhelming. The midpoint scenes involving Eddie and Angela demonstrate strong pacing control. Eddie's gradual shift toward violence is built through longer dialogue scenes before erupting into confrontation. The meat locker sequence uses tighter cuts to increase intensity, but the buildup remains slow and uncomfortable. Similarly, Angela's staircase scene is edited with lingering shots rather than frantic cuts. The flames surround her, yet the pacing remains steady, emphasizing emotional tragedy over spectacle. The climax inside the Lakeview Hotel showcases the film's strongest editorial structure. The calm exploration of the hotel creates suspense before the videotape revelation. The discovery of the tape is not rushed. The editing allows silence to dominate as James watches the footage. There are minimal reaction shots. The horror comes from realization rather than visual chaos. This restraint makes the reveal deeply powerful. Following the truth, the pacing shifts once more. The final confrontation with Maria and Pyramid Head moves with controlled urgency. Cuts become slightly quicker but never chaotic. The destruction of Pyramid Head is edited in a clear, symbolic manner, allowing viewers to understand its emotional meaning. Overall, the editing and pacing of Return to Silent Hill reflect discipline and thematic awareness. The film trusts slow build-up, controlled repetition, and emotional pauses. Rather than chasing constant thrills, it uses rhythm to mirror psychological unraveling. The result is a haunting narrative flow that feels immersive, balanced, and emotionally deliberate. Sound design, music, and score are essential to the emotional and psychological power of Return to Silent Hill. In a story where atmosphere carries as much weight as dialogue, sound becomes an invisible force guiding the audience's feelings. Rather than overwhelming viewers with constant loud effects, the film uses silence, ambient noise, and carefully placed music to create dread and emotional depth. One of the most striking elements is the use of silence. Many scenes unfold with minimal background music. When James walks alone through fog-covered streets, the only sounds are distant wind, faint footsteps, and subtle environmental echoes. This restrained approach creates discomfort. Silence forces viewers to focus on every small detail, making even a quiet scrape or distant metallic clang feel threatening. The absence of music often increases tension more effectively than loud sound effects. Ambient sound design plays a crucial role in building the town's identity. Silent Hill does not feel empty. It feels alive in a disturbing way. The creaking of old buildings, the faint hum of unseen machinery, and the distant echo of something moving out of sight create constant unease. These background sounds are layered carefully. They never dominate the scene, but they are always present, reminding the audience that danger could appear at any moment. The siren sound that signals the town's transformation is one of the most powerful recurring audio elements. When the environment shifts into its darker, industrial version, the siren echoes loudly across the streets. It becomes a warning signal, both for James and the audience. Each time it sounds, viewers know that reality is about to distort. The repetition of this audio cue creates psychological conditioning. Even before the transformation occurs, the siren alone triggers tension. The musical score itself reflects the emotional themes of grief and guilt. The compositions blend haunting piano melodies with industrial percussion and distorted electronic textures. Soft piano notes often accompany flashbacks of Mary, emphasizing the sadness and fragility of those memories. The melodies are simple and slow, creating a sense of longing. In contrast, darker scenes use low, droning tones and metallic sounds that feel heavy and oppressive. Music is used sparingly during major horror moments. When Pyramid Head appears, the soundtrack often shifts into deep industrial rumbling rather than dramatic orchestral blasts. The sound feels mechanical and relentless, matching the character's symbolic role as executioner. The dragging of his massive blade across the ground creates a distinct metallic scrape that becomes associated with dread. That single sound is enough to signal his presence before he is fully visible. Maria's scenes are accompanied by subtle musical variations. When she first appears, the score includes slightly warmer tones mixed with quiet tension. Her presence feels comforting yet unsettling. As her repeated deaths occur, the music grows colder and more fragmented. This subtle shift reflects James's growing confusion and emotional instability. The score mirrors his internal state without needing explicit dialogue. The videotape revelation scene is especially powerful because of its restrained sound design. As James watches the footage, there is almost no music. The room is quiet except for the faint mechanical sound of the tape playing. This minimal approach allows the emotional weight of the scene to land fully. Adding dramatic music would have distracted from the raw realization on James's face. Silence, in this case, becomes more devastating than any musical cue. Angela's staircase scene also demonstrates thoughtful sound design. The crackling of flames surrounds her, but the overall sound mix remains balanced. Her voice remains clear and steady despite the fire. The subtle echo in her speech adds a dreamlike quality, suggesting that this moment exists partly in her personal psychological space. The sound design enhances the emotional tragedy without overpowering it. The final confrontation with Pyramid Head combines layered sound elements. Deep rumbling tones build slowly as the executioners approach. When they ultimately destroy themselves, the sound cuts sharply, followed by quiet emptiness. This sudden drop in audio intensity signals resolution. The absence of oppressive noise suggests that James's internal punishment has ended. Overall, the sound design, music, and score of Return to Silent Hill are carefully crafted to support psychological storytelling. Silence is used as a weapon. Ambient noise creates constant unease. Music reflects emotional memory and guilt rather than simple fear. Every audio element feels purposeful. Together, they create an immersive experience that lingers in the mind long after the final scene fades to gray. The production design of Return to Silent Hill is one of the film's strongest elements. The town itself is not just a backdrop for horror. It is a character. Every street, building, and interior space reflects the emotional state of James Sunderland. The design team creates an environment that feels abandoned, decaying, and psychologically symbolic at the same time. Through detailed sets and carefully chosen locations, the world of Silent Hill becomes immersive and unsettling. The exterior design of the town establishes the tone immediately. Streets are covered in layers of ash and fog, giving the impression that time has stopped. Storefronts are broken and weathered. Street signs are rusted and barely readable. Parked cars sit untouched, as if their owners vanished without warning. The production design avoids exaggerated destruction. Instead of making the town look like it was hit by an explosion, it appears slowly abandoned. This subtle decay feels more realistic and disturbing. The fog is integrated into the design rather than added as an afterthought. Buildings are constructed and positioned in ways that allow fog to hide their full shapes. Corners disappear into gray emptiness. Streetlights glow faintly through the mist. This design choice creates depth and unpredictability. The audience never sees the entire space clearly, which enhances tension. The town feels larger than what is shown on screen. Interior locations add another layer of detail. The apartment complex James explores early in the film feels cramped and deteriorated. Peeling wallpaper hangs loosely from stained walls. Furniture is overturned or broken. Dim lighting reveals layers of dust and neglect. These details suggest years of abandonment. Every room feels lived in, even though no one is present. The realism of these spaces grounds the supernatural elements in something believable. The hospital set stands out as one of the most carefully designed environments. Long hallways stretch into darkness, lined with flickering fluorescent lights. Wheelchairs sit abandoned in corners. Hospital beds are stained and rusted. Medical equipment appears outdated and unused. The production design mirrors Mary's illness, connecting the setting directly to James's memories. When the hospital shifts into the darker version of Silent Hill, metal grates replace tile floors, and walls become covered in rust and peeling paint. The transformation feels organic because the design team builds both versions with matching structures. The alternate dimension of Silent Hill is defined by industrial textures. Rusted metal, chains, cages, and grated flooring dominate the environment. The color palette shifts toward deep reds and dark browns. These elements symbolize punishment and confinement. The use of practical set pieces, such as real metal structures and physical barriers, adds weight and realism. Actors interact directly with these environments, which enhances immersion. The Lakeview Hotel serves as the emotional center of the film's design. At first, it appears calm and almost intact compared to other locations. Warm lighting and structured furniture create a temporary sense of order. However, subtle details hint that something is wrong. Carpets are faded. Paint is cracked. As the hotel transforms, the elegance collapses into decay. Walls peel away to reveal corroded surfaces beneath. The shift feels like the exposure of hidden truth, aligning with James's emotional revelation. Angela's staircase scene demonstrates how production design can reflect personal trauma. The staircase appears engulfed in flames, yet the structure remains intact. The fire is integrated carefully into the environment, creating a surreal yet believable setting. The design suggests that this is Angela's personal version of Silent Hill, shaped by her pain. Eddie's meat locker location contrasts sharply with other settings. Cold, metallic walls and hanging carcasses create a harsh and brutal environment. The industrial feel emphasizes Eddie's emotional coldness and growing violence. The setting supports the intensity of their confrontation. Overall, the production design, sets, and locations in Return to Silent Hill are deeply intentional. Every detail supports the psychological themes of guilt, decay, and confrontation. The town feels authentic yet symbolic. By blending realism with nightmare imagery, the design team creates a world that is both believable and haunting. Silent Hill does not simply look frightening. It feels emotionally charged and alive. Visual effects and practical effects play a critical role in shaping the disturbing atmosphere of Return to Silent Hill. The film avoids relying entirely on computer-generated imagery. Instead, it blends practical effects with digital enhancements to create a grounded yet nightmarish world. This balanced approach allows the horror to feel physical, textured, and believable rather than artificial. One of the most important decisions in the film's design is the heavy use of practical creature effects. The humanoid monsters that roam the streets are brought to life through detailed costumes, prosthetics, and physical performances. Twisted limbs, faceless heads, and unnatural body shapes are achieved through makeup and carefully constructed suits. This physical presence gives weight to the creatures. When they move toward James, their footsteps feel real. Their breathing and subtle body movements create discomfort because they occupy actual space in the environment. Pyramid Head stands as the most iconic example of practical craftsmanship. The massive metal helmet, oversized blade, and muscular costume are physically built rather than fully digital. The weight of the helmet forces the performer to move slowly and deliberately, which enhances the character's imposing presence. The dragging of the blade across concrete creates real sparks and sound, reinforcing authenticity. Digital effects are used subtly to enhance shadows or minor details, but the foundation remains practical. The transformation sequences between the normal town and its darker industrial version rely on a combination of practical set changes and visual effects. Instead of completely replacing environments with digital models, the production design team constructs layered sets. Walls peel back mechanically, rust spreads through digital compositing, and lighting shifts dramatically. This hybrid method prevents the transitions from feeling overly computer-generated. The physical sets allow actors to react naturally to their surroundings. Fog effects are largely practical, created using controlled atmospheric machines on set. This choice adds depth and texture to exterior scenes. The fog interacts with light in a natural way, producing soft glows and shadows. While digital enhancement may refine certain shots, the base atmosphere is physically present during filming. This creates a more immersive experience for both actors and viewers. Maria's repeated deaths involve carefully executed practical effects combined with restrained digital adjustments. Blood effects are applied using traditional methods such as concealed tubing and makeup appliances. Rather than exaggerating violence with excessive computer animation, the film keeps the moments focused and grounded. This restraint makes the emotional impact stronger. The horror feels immediate rather than stylized. Angela's staircase scene demonstrates effective blending of techniques. The fire surrounding her is partly practical, created with controlled flame rigs and safe environmental effects. Digital enhancements extend the flames and add atmospheric distortion, but the core structure remains tangible. The heat and light reflect realistically on Angela's face and the surrounding surfaces, creating a convincing illusion. The meat locker confrontation with Eddie also benefits from practical design. Hanging carcasses, metal hooks, and frosted surfaces are physically constructed. Breath vapor in the cold air is captured naturally on set. Minimal digital correction ensures safety and visual clarity, but the majority of the scene's impact comes from real-world textures and lighting. Subtle visual effects are used to distort reality without overwhelming the frame. Reflections in mirrors sometimes shift slightly out of sync. Background shapes move almost imperceptibly. Rust spreads across surfaces in time-lapse transitions. These details are enhanced digitally but remain understated. The goal is not spectacle but unease. The destruction of Pyramid Head at the climax combines practical stunt work with controlled digital layering. The physical costume is used during the collapse, while computer effects enhance cracking and debris. The sequence remains clear and grounded, avoiding chaotic visuals. This controlled execution ensures that the symbolic meaning of the moment remains central. Overall, the visual and practical effects in Return to Silent Hill support the psychological tone rather than dominate it. By prioritizing tangible creature designs, physical sets, and restrained digital enhancements, the film maintains realism within its surreal world. The effects never distract from character emotion. Instead, they strengthen immersion, making the horror feel personal, textured, and disturbingly authentic. The dialogue and screenplay of Return to Silent Hill are carefully crafted to support the film's psychological depth. Unlike many horror films that rely on constant exposition or dramatic speeches, this screenplay embraces restraint. Conversations are often short, layered, and emotionally charged. The writing trusts silence as much as spoken words. This balance between dialogue and quiet reflection strengthens the haunting tone of the story. One of the most important qualities of the screenplay is subtlety. James Sunderland does not openly explain his emotions in the early parts of the film. His lines are simple and often hesitant. When he first arrives in Silent Hill, he calls out Mary's name softly, almost unsure whether he expects an answer. This hesitation reflects denial. The screenplay avoids over-explaining his grief. Instead, it allows viewers to feel his confusion through fragmented conversations and incomplete thoughts. The dialogue between James and Maria highlights the script's layered approach. Maria's words are playful and slightly provocative, but beneath her tone lies something unsettling. She frequently challenges James with statements about his loneliness or past. Her lines often sound comforting at first, yet they carry an undercurrent of manipulation. The screenplay uses this contrast to show that Maria is not simply a love interest. She is a projection of James's desires. Their exchanges feel intimate but unstable, reinforcing the psychological tension. Mary's dialogue in flashbacks provides emotional complexity. Early memories present her as warm and affectionate. However, as her illness worsens, her tone shifts. She expresses frustration, anger, and hopelessness. The screenplay does not portray her as cruel, but it allows her to show human weakness. These honest lines prevent the relationship from feeling idealized. Instead, it feels real and strained. The arguments between James and Mary are written with restraint, avoiding melodrama while still conveying pain. Angela's dialogue is intentionally fragmented and reflective of trauma. She often pauses before speaking, as if choosing her words carefully. Her lines hint at abuse and suffering without describing events directly. This indirect approach makes her story more powerful. When she speaks on the burning staircase, her calm tone contrasts with the flames around her. The simplicity of her words adds to the emotional impact. The screenplay trusts that viewers will understand her pain without explicit explanation. Eddie's dialogue evolves throughout the film. At first, his speech is awkward and defensive. He laughs nervously and avoids direct answers. As the story progresses, his lines become sharper and more confrontational. During the meat locker scene, his monologue about being mocked reveals deep resentment. The screenplay gives him space to express his distorted reasoning. His words show how he justifies violence rather than accepting responsibility. This layered writing prevents him from becoming a one-dimensional villain. The screenplay also makes effective use of repetition. Phrases connected to the special place are repeated in different contexts, each time gaining new meaning. What begins as a romantic memory eventually becomes the setting for the truth. This repetition ties the narrative together structurally and emotionally. Silence is perhaps the most powerful element of the screenplay. Many scenes include long pauses where characters do not speak. These gaps allow tension to build naturally. For example, when James watches the videotape, almost no dialogue interrupts the moment. His realization unfolds visually rather than verbally. This choice respects the audience's intelligence and preserves emotional authenticity. The final confrontation with Maria is driven by concise but meaningful dialogue. She tempts James with comforting words, suggesting that he deserves peace. His response is direct and honest. He admits his weakness without dramatic speeches. The simplicity of his confession gives it weight. Overall, the dialogue and screenplay of Return to Silent Hill prioritize emotional realism over spectacle. Conversations feel personal and restrained. Each character's voice reflects their psychological state. By combining subtle writing, meaningful repetition, and intentional silence, the screenplay strengthens the film's themes of guilt, denial, and acceptance. It supports the horror without overshadowing the emotional core. Return to Silent Hill stands as a strong example of psychological horror executed with discipline and purpose. Rather than leaning heavily into jump scares or non-stop violence, the film carefully blends psychological horror, mystery, and emotional drama. Its success lies in how it balances these elements while maintaining a consistent tone. The genre execution feels intentional, never chaotic or unfocused. At its core, the film belongs to psychological horror. The true fear does not come from monsters alone, but from James Sunderland's internal struggle. The horror is rooted in guilt, denial, and memory. From the beginning, the tone is somber and reflective rather than explosive. The slow pacing and quiet atmosphere establish that this is not a typical survival horror story. It is an emotional descent into the mind of a man avoiding the truth. Mystery is another major genre component. The question of whether Mary is alive drives the early narrative. The letter acts as a mystery device, pulling both James and the audience forward. The tone during these early scenes feels curious and tense rather than terrifying. The film allows viewers to question reality. Is the letter supernatural? Is James hallucinating? This sense of uncertainty strengthens the psychological tone without relying on sudden fear tactics. As the film progresses, survival horror elements become more visible. The appearance of monsters and the presence of Pyramid Head introduce physical danger. However, even during these moments, the tone remains controlled. Action scenes are not fast or chaotic. They are heavy and deliberate. The monsters move slowly, creating dread rather than excitement. This restrained execution prevents the film from shifting into action horror territory. Tone consistency is one of the film's strongest achievements. Many horror films struggle with uneven tonal shifts, especially when combining emotional drama with violent imagery. Return to Silent Hill avoids this problem by maintaining a steady emotional weight throughout. Even during intense scenes, the atmosphere remains somber. There is no sudden comedic relief or exaggerated spectacle to break immersion. This consistency ensures that the psychological themes remain central. That said, the film does incorporate subtle tone shifts to reflect James's mental state. Early scenes feel uncertain and slightly hopeful, driven by the possibility that Mary may still be alive. When Maria first appears, there is a brief tonal shift toward warmth and temptation. Her flirtatious presence introduces emotional complexity. However, this warmth never becomes comforting. It always carries an unsettling undertone. As the story moves into its second act, the tone darkens steadily. Repeated deaths, violent confrontations, and emotional revelations strip away any remaining optimism. The shift into the darker dimension of Silent Hill reinforces this tonal change. Industrial textures, harsher lighting, and deeper sound design signal that the narrative is moving closer to painful truth. The climax introduces the most significant tonal shift. When James watches the videotape, the film transitions from mystery to tragic confession. The tone becomes raw and emotionally exposed. The horror no longer comes from creatures. It comes from realization. This shift feels earned because the entire narrative builds toward it. The final confrontation with Pyramid Head is not triumphant or action-driven. It is solemn and symbolic. Even the ending maintains tonal ambiguity. There is no dramatic victory music or celebratory release. Instead, the conclusion feels reflective and open. Whether James leaves the town or remains trapped, the tone remains contemplative. The film respects the seriousness of its themes. Overall, Return to Silent Hill executes its genre blend with maturity. Psychological horror remains dominant, supported by mystery and restrained survival elements. Tone shifts occur gradually and always align with character development. The film avoids sensationalism and focuses on emotional consequence. By maintaining balance and thematic consistency, it delivers a haunting experience that feels cohesive and purposeful. Return to Silent Hill is driven by powerful themes that go far beyond traditional horror. While the film includes disturbing creatures and unsettling environments, its true focus lies in emotional and psychological exploration. At its core, the story examines guilt, grief, denial, trauma, and the consequences of avoiding truth. Every character and setting reinforces these deeper messages. The most dominant theme is guilt. James Sunderland's journey through Silent Hill is not random. The town acts as a reflection of his buried guilt over Mary's death. For most of the film, he believes he is a grieving husband searching for his lost wife. However, as the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear that he is subconsciously punishing himself. The monsters, Pyramid Head, and Maria are not external enemies. They are manifestations of his inner conflict. The film suggests that guilt does not disappear simply because someone tries to ignore it. It waits beneath the surface until it demands recognition. Closely connected to guilt is the theme of denial. James begins the story in complete denial of his actions. The letter from Mary represents his refusal to accept reality. He chooses to believe that she might still be alive rather than confront the painful truth. Silent Hill forces him to face what he has suppressed. Maria symbolizes this denial. She offers comfort, distraction, and emotional escape. Each time James loses her and she returns, the film shows how denial can feel temporarily reassuring but ultimately unstable. Grief is another central theme. The film portrays grief not as a simple sadness but as a complex emotional state that can distort perception. James's memories of Mary shift between warmth and frustration. Their relationship was loving but strained by illness. The screenplay avoids portraying grief as pure devotion. Instead, it acknowledges that caregiving can bring exhaustion, resentment, and emotional breakdown. This realistic portrayal deepens the emotional weight of James's confession. The theme of trauma is explored through supporting characters. Angela represents unresolved trauma from abuse. Her version of Silent Hill is filled with fire and pain. She cannot detach from her suffering long enough to seek healing. Eddie represents another response to trauma, anger and blame. Instead of confronting his insecurity, he projects his resentment outward. His violent choices reflect what happens when someone refuses to take responsibility for their emotions. These parallel arcs highlight the film's broader message that trauma affects individuals differently. Responsibility is a key message woven throughout the narrative. Silent Hill does not randomly punish people. It exposes what they have done or endured. James's final confrontation with Pyramid Head represents acceptance of responsibility. When he admits that he killed Mary not only out of mercy but also weakness, the executioners destroy themselves. The film suggests that true punishment comes from within. External monsters lose power once truth is acknowledged. Forgiveness is another important theme, though it remains complicated. The final imagined conversation between James and Mary hints at emotional closure. Forgiveness in the film is not portrayed as forgetting wrongdoing. Instead, it is about understanding human weakness. The story suggests that self-forgiveness is possible only after honest acceptance. Without that step, individuals remain trapped in their own psychological hell. The concept of personal hell is central to the world of Silent Hill. The town reflects each character's internal struggles. It is not simply a haunted location but a symbolic space shaped by emotion. This reinforces the idea that unresolved guilt and trauma create mental prisons. Silent Hill becomes a metaphor for conscience. Another subtle theme is the danger of idealizing memory. James initially remembers Mary as only loving and kind. As flashbacks progress, he recalls arguments and frustration. The film shows how memory can be selective. Clinging to idealized memories can prevent growth and acceptance. Facing the full truth, including imperfections, is necessary for emotional healing. Ultimately, Return to Silent Hill communicates that the greatest horror is not physical threat but emotional avoidance. Guilt, denial, trauma, and responsibility shape reality. The film's core message is that confronting truth, no matter how painful, is the only path toward peace. Without that confrontation, individuals remain trapped in their own Silent Hill. Return to Silent Hill is built on layers of symbolism that deepen its psychological impact. Almost every creature, location, and visual detail represents something beyond its surface appearance. The film does not explain these symbols directly. Instead, it allows viewers to interpret their meaning through context and emotional cues. This layered storytelling is what gives the movie lasting depth. The town of Silent Hill itself is the most important symbol. It is not simply an abandoned resort covered in fog. It represents a physical manifestation of the human mind under stress. For James Sunderland, the town reflects guilt and denial. The heavy fog symbolizes confusion and suppressed memory. It limits vision, just as James limits his awareness of the truth. As he moves closer to self-realization, the fog begins to thin slightly, suggesting clarity. Pyramid Head is perhaps the strongest symbol in the film. His massive metal helmet hides his identity, making him faceless and inhuman. He represents judgment and punishment. The weight of his helmet suggests the burden of guilt, while his enormous blade symbolizes execution. Pyramid Head does not speak because he is not a character in the traditional sense. He is a function of James's conscience. When James accepts responsibility for Mary's death, Pyramid Head destroys himself. This action symbolizes that punishment is no longer necessary once truth is acknowledged. Maria carries deep symbolic meaning as well. She looks identical to Mary but behaves differently. Maria represents James's idealized version of his wife. She is confident, affectionate, and free from illness. Her repeated deaths symbolize the collapse of illusion. Each time she returns, it shows how denial can resurface even after being shattered. Her final attempt to tempt James into rejecting the truth represents the final test of his self-awareness. Mary, in contrast, symbolizes reality. Her illness represents unavoidable suffering. The strained moments in their marriage symbolize the complexity of love under pressure. The videotape is not only a plot device but a symbolic mirror. It forces James to watch himself objectively. The act of viewing the tape symbolizes confronting memory without distortion. The shifting environments also hold symbolic weight. The normal version of Silent Hill appears abandoned but still recognizable. The alternate version transforms into rusted metal, cages, and industrial decay. This darker dimension represents the raw, emotional core of guilt and trauma. The rust spreading across walls symbolizes corruption eating away at suppressed truth. The sirens that signal transformation act as alarms from within James's mind, warning that denial cannot hold forever. Angela's burning staircase is rich with symbolism. Fire often represents purification, destruction, or both. For Angela, fire symbolizes her trauma and suffering. She does not see flames as threatening because they reflect her internal pain. Her decision to walk into the fire suggests surrender to despair. The staircase itself represents progression. While James moves toward acceptance, Angela ascends into her personal hell. Eddie's meat locker confrontation also contains symbolic meaning. The cold, metallic environment represents emotional numbness. Hanging carcasses reflect dehumanization and violence. Eddie's transformation from victim to aggressor symbolizes how unprocessed humiliation can turn into destructive anger. Mirrors and reflections appear throughout the film as recurring symbols. James often sees distorted reflections of himself. These moments represent fractured identity. He does not fully recognize who he is because he has hidden part of himself. Reflections act as reminders that truth cannot be avoided. Water imagery near the Lakeview Hotel carries symbolic meaning as well. Water often represents cleansing or rebirth. The lake where James confronts his final emotions suggests the possibility of renewal. Whether he leaves Silent Hill or remains trapped depends on whether he can emotionally cleanse himself through acceptance. Overall, the symbolism in Return to Silent Hill transforms the film from simple horror into psychological allegory. Every monster, setting, and object reflects internal struggle. The hidden meanings invite viewers to look beyond surface scares and consider the emotional truths beneath the fog. Silent Hill becomes more than a town. It becomes a symbolic landscape of conscience. While Return to Silent Hill is primarily a psychological horror film, it also contains subtle social and cultural commentary beneath its haunting surface. The film does not deliver direct political messages or overt social statements. Instead, it explores deeply human issues that reflect broader societal concerns. Through its characters and symbolic storytelling, it comments on mental health, caregiving, masculinity, trauma, and the consequences of emotional repression. One of the strongest social themes in the film relates to mental health. James Sunderland's journey reflects the danger of suppressing guilt and grief. In many cultures, emotional vulnerability is often discouraged, especially among men. James embodies this repression. Rather than openly processing Mary's illness and death, he internalizes everything. He isolates himself. He avoids discussing his pain. Silent Hill becomes a manifestation of what happens when emotional trauma is ignored instead of confronted. The film subtly suggests that unaddressed psychological wounds can distort reality and lead to self-destruction. The portrayal of caregiving also carries social commentary. Mary's long illness places strain on her marriage with James. The film does not romanticize this experience. Instead, it shows the emotional exhaustion, frustration, and helplessness that can come with long-term care. This depiction challenges idealized narratives about unconditional strength. It presents caregiving as emotionally complex and mentally draining. In doing so, the film acknowledges a reality many families experience but rarely discuss openly. Masculinity is another theme present beneath the surface. James struggles with weakness and guilt but initially refuses to admit it. His identity as a husband is challenged by Mary's illness. He feels powerless and trapped. Rather than seeking help or expressing vulnerability, he withdraws. The film reflects how traditional expectations of masculinity can discourage emotional openness. James's eventual confession represents a break from that pattern. His acceptance of responsibility shows that strength comes from honesty rather than silence. Angela's storyline introduces commentary on abuse and trauma. Her fragmented dialogue and burning staircase symbolize the long-lasting impact of domestic violence. The film does not exploit her suffering for shock value. Instead, it presents her trauma as deeply personal and isolating. Angela's inability to escape her personal hell reflects how society often fails survivors of abuse. Her tragic arc highlights the importance of support and understanding for those carrying invisible scars. Eddie's character offers commentary on social alienation and bullying. His resentment grows from feeling mocked and humiliated. Rather than confronting his insecurity constructively, he turns to violence. The film does not justify his actions, but it shows how prolonged humiliation can warp perception. Eddie's descent into aggression reflects how isolation and untreated anger can create dangerous outcomes. His story acts as a warning about the psychological consequences of social rejection. The town of Silent Hill itself can be interpreted as a cultural metaphor. It represents the collective unconscious, a space where hidden guilt and unresolved issues surface. In a broader sense, the town reflects society's tendency to bury uncomfortable truths. Just as James suppresses his actions, communities sometimes avoid confronting painful realities. Silent Hill forces exposure. It becomes a place where denial collapses under emotional pressure. The film also comments on memory and narrative control. James initially remembers his relationship with Mary in selective ways. This mirrors how individuals and even societies can reshape memory to avoid discomfort. The videotape scene symbolizes objective truth breaking through personal narrative. It suggests that facing unfiltered reality is necessary for growth. Importantly, Return to Silent Hill avoids direct political messaging. Its commentary remains personal rather than partisan. By focusing on universal emotional experiences, the film speaks to a wide audience. Grief, guilt, trauma, and responsibility are not confined to one culture or ideology. They are human experiences. Ultimately, the social commentary of Return to Silent Hill lies in its exploration of emotional accountability. The film suggests that ignoring mental health, suppressing trauma, and denying responsibility create personal and collective consequences. Silent Hill is not just a supernatural town. It is a reflection of what happens when individuals and societies refuse to confront uncomfortable truths. Return to Silent Hill delivers several powerful scenes that stay with viewers long after the credits roll. These moments are not memorable simply because of shock value or violence. They resonate because of emotional weight, symbolism, and psychological impact. Each major scene pushes James Sunderland closer to the truth while deepening the atmosphere of dread. One of the earliest impactful moments occurs when James first steps into Silent Hill. The camera follows him through thick fog as distant shapes fade in and out of view. There is almost no music, only the sound of wind and his footsteps. This scene establishes isolation in a powerful way. The emptiness of the town feels unnatural. Viewers immediately understand that this is not a normal place. The stillness itself becomes threatening. The first encounter with a creature is another unforgettable scene. When James sees the distorted humanoid figure moving slowly in the fog, the tension builds gradually. The monster does not rush toward him. Instead, it approaches in an unnatural, stiff motion. This slow pacing makes the encounter deeply unsettling. The horror feels psychological rather than explosive. It marks the moment when James realizes that Silent Hill is more than an abandoned town. The introduction of Maria stands out as one of the most emotionally complex scenes. When James sees her for the first time, the shock on his face is clear. She looks almost identical to Mary, yet her personality is entirely different. The quiet conversation that follows carries both hope and discomfort. This scene shifts the narrative from simple mystery into psychological tension. Maria's presence becomes a turning point in the story. One of the most disturbing and symbolic moments involves Pyramid Head's first major appearance. As he stands silently in the distance, dragging his massive blade, the sense of dread intensifies. The sound of metal scraping against concrete echoes through the empty space. The confrontation feels inevitable. The character's slow, deliberate movement makes him more terrifying than any fast-moving creature could be. Maria's first death is deeply impactful. When she is attacked by Pyramid Head, the violence is shocking but controlled. What truly resonates is James's reaction. His devastation mirrors the loss of Mary. The emotional repetition of loss creates psychological weight. Viewers begin to understand that Maria's existence is tied to something deeper within James. Angela's staircase scene is one of the most haunting in the entire film. Surrounded by flames, she speaks calmly about her suffering. The fire represents her personal trauma, yet she does not react in fear. The visual contrast between destruction and emotional numbness creates powerful symbolism. Her decision to walk upward into the flames feels tragic and unforgettable. The confrontation with Eddie in the meat locker also leaves a strong impression. The cold environment, hanging carcasses, and tense dialogue create a claustrophobic atmosphere. Eddie's emotional breakdown reveals how deeply he has been consumed by anger. The scene forces James to confront violence directly, adding moral complexity to his journey. Perhaps the most impactful moment of all is the videotape revelation in the Lakeview Hotel. The quiet room, the mechanical sound of the tape playing, and James's silent reaction combine to create devastating emotional force. Watching himself suffocate Mary destroys his denial. This scene redefines everything that came before it. The horror shifts from external monsters to internal truth. The final confrontation with Maria is equally memorable. She attempts to persuade James to reject reality and stay with her. Her tone is tempting yet desperate. When James refuses and admits his guilt, the scene becomes emotionally powerful rather than physically violent. The destruction of Pyramid Head serves as a symbolic climax. The executioners drive their blades into the ground and collapse. The absence of dramatic celebration makes the moment feel solemn. It represents the end of punishment through acceptance. Together, these scenes define Return to Silent Hill. They are impactful not because they are loud, but because they are emotionally honest. Each moment deepens the psychological narrative and leaves a lasting impression. Return to Silent Hill exists within a very specific style of horror filmmaking. It does not follow the formula of fast-paced, jump-scare-driven movies. Instead, it aligns more closely with psychological horror films that focus on emotional trauma and symbolic storytelling. When compared to similar movies and even to director Christophe Gan's earlier work, its unique approach becomes clearer. The most obvious comparison is the original Silent Hill film released in 2006, also directed by Christophe Gans. That earlier film focused heavily on visual spectacle and world building. It introduced audiences to the fog-covered town, religious cult elements, and iconic monsters like Pyramid Head. While it was visually striking, its narrative centered more on mystery and supernatural horror. In contrast, Return to Silent Hill narrows its focus. Rather than expanding the mythology of the town, it dives deeply into one character's psychological collapse. The 2026 film feels more intimate and emotionally driven, prioritizing internal conflict over external lore. When compared to Silent Hill, Revelation from 2012, the difference becomes even stronger. Revelation leaned more toward action horror, with faster pacing and heavier emphasis on physical threats. Return to Silent Hill deliberately moves away from that style. It slows down the narrative and removes excessive action sequences. This shift brings the tone closer to the emotional intensity of the Silent Hill 2 video game, which is widely regarded as one of the most mature and tragic stories in horror gaming. Outside the franchise, the film can be compared to psychological horror movies like The Babadook. Both films explore grief and suppressed emotion as central themes. In The Babadook, the monster represents unresolved trauma and depression. Similarly, in Return to Silent Hill, Pyramid Head represents guilt and self-punishment. In both stories, the horror becomes less about defeating a creature and more about confronting internal pain. Another strong comparison can be made with Jacob's Ladder. That film also blends reality with psychological hallucination, gradually revealing that the protagonist's experiences are tied to guilt and trauma. Like Jacob's Ladder, Return to Silent Hill uses fragmented memories and shifting environments to blur the line between reality and mental distortion. Both films require the audience to question what is real and what is symbolic. The movie also shares thematic elements with Hereditary. While Hereditary focuses on family trauma and supernatural influence, its slow pacing and oppressive atmosphere mirror the tone of Return to Silent Hill. Both films maintain emotional seriousness throughout. There is no lighthearted relief to break tension. Instead, dread builds steadily until it becomes emotionally overwhelming. Christoph Gans's directorial style is evident in the visual presentation. His earlier work often emphasized elaborate production design and stylized imagery. In Return to Silent Hill, that visual strength remains, but it is more restrained. The focus shifts from grand horror spectacle to symbolic framing and intimate character moments. This evolution shows growth in his storytelling approach. Compared to mainstream horror franchises like The Conjuring or Insidious, Return to Silent Hill feels more meditative. Those films rely on supernatural investigations and sudden scares. In contrast, Silent Hill relies on atmosphere and symbolism. The horror unfolds gradually, often through silence and emotional confrontation rather than loud sound cues. Even when compared to other video game adaptations, this film stands apart. Many adaptations prioritize action and fan service. Return to Silent Hill remains loyal to the emotional complexity of its source material. It treats its story as tragedy rather than spectacle. Overall, Return to Silent Hill aligns most closely with psychological horror films that explore guilt and trauma. It improves upon earlier franchise entries by narrowing its focus and deepening its emotional core. By blending symbolic storytelling with restrained direction, it stands alongside thoughtful horror films that prioritize character over chaos. The ending of Return to Silent Hill is the emotional and psychological culmination of everything that came before it. It does not rely on a final jump scare or dramatic twist meant only to shock the audience. Instead, it delivers a revelation that forces both James Sunderland and the viewers to re-evaluate the entire journey. The conclusion is tragic, reflective, and intentionally open to interpretation. The central turning point of the ending occurs when James watches the videotape in the Lakeview Hotel. Until that moment, he believes he is a grieving husband searching for his lost wife. The mysterious letter gave him hope that Mary might somehow still be alive. However, the videotape exposes the truth. James suffocated Mary during her illness. The act was not committed in rage, but in despair and emotional exhaustion. He could not endure watching her suffer any longer, and he could not face his own feelings of frustration and helplessness. This revelation transforms the entire narrative. The monsters, the shifting town, and Pyramid Head are no longer random horrors. They become manifestations of James's guilt. Silent Hill was never calling him to reunite with Mary. It was forcing him to confront what he had done. The town serves as a psychological purgatory, designed to strip away denial and expose truth. Maria's final appearance is a key part of the ending's meaning. She represents James's desire to escape responsibility. Throughout the film, she offers comfort and distraction. In the final confrontation, she tempts him directly. She suggests that he suffered too, that his actions were understandable, and that he deserves peace without guilt. This moment represents the ultimate test. If James chooses Maria, he chooses denial and illusion. If he rejects her, he chooses painful honesty. When James confesses that he killed Mary not only out of mercy but also weakness, he completes his emotional arc. He stops blaming circumstances and accepts responsibility. This acceptance leads to the destruction of Pyramid Head. The executioner is no longer needed because James has judged himself. The symbolism is clear. Punishment loses power once guilt is acknowledged openly. The ending leaves room for multiple interpretations regarding James's fate. In one interpretation, he leaves Silent Hill after accepting the truth. The thinning fog suggests clarity. Driving away from the town symbolizes the possibility of redemption. He cannot undo what he did, but he can live honestly with the consequences. This interpretation frames the ending as bittersweet. There is no happiness, but there is emotional growth. Another interpretation suggests that James remains trapped. The weight of his guilt may still be too heavy. Silent Hill may continue to exist as his personal prison. The ambiguity allows viewers to project their own understanding of forgiveness and accountability onto the story. The final imagined conversation with Mary adds emotional complexity. She appears calm, almost forgiving. Whether this moment is supernatural or purely psychological is unclear. It may represent James forgiving himself enough to move forward. It does not erase his wrongdoing, but it acknowledges human weakness. This quiet exchange reinforces the theme that acceptance, not escape, is the path toward peace. The ending also emphasizes that Silent Hill is not inherently evil. It does not attack innocent people randomly. It reflects inner turmoil. Angela and Eddie's fates demonstrate different responses to trauma. Angela surrenders to despair. Eddie embraces anger. James, in contrast, reaches self-awareness. The ending highlights that personal choices determine whether someone escapes their inner hell. Ultimately, Return to Silent Hill concludes as a tragic meditation on guilt and responsibility. The horror is not the monsters. It is the realization of what one is capable of doing under emotional strain. The film's final interpretation suggests that truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to break the cycle of self-punishment. Return to Silent Hill entered production with strong expectations from both longtime fans and the broader horror audience. As a return to one of the most respected psychological horror franchises, the film carried significant creative and financial responsibility. While exact financial figures depend on final studio disclosures, industry reports suggest that the production operated within a mid to high range horror budget, reflecting its detailed set design, practical effects, and international collaboration. Unlike low-budget horror films that rely heavily on minimal locations and small casts, Return to Silent Hill required extensive production design. Large-scale sets were constructed to recreate the fog-covered town, the hospital interiors, the apartment complex, and the Lakeview Hotel. Practical creature effects, complex lighting setups, and layered transformation sequences also contributed to overall costs. Because the film blended practical and digital effects, its budget likely exceeded that of smaller independent horror releases while remaining below the level of major blockbuster franchises. The involvement of director Christophe Gans also influenced expectations. His return to the franchise generated interest from fans of the 2006 Silent Hill film. Marketing campaigns focused heavily on faithfulness to the Silent Hill 2 storyline, which is widely regarded as one of the strongest narratives in horror gaming. Promotional materials emphasized psychological depth rather than pure spectacle, positioning the film as a serious horror drama rather than a mainstream action release. Upon release, box office performance reflected both fan loyalty and broader audience curiosity. Horror as a genre has remained commercially reliable, especially when supported by strong brand recognition. Return to Silent Hill benefited from the established reputation of the franchise. Opening weekend numbers were driven largely by longtime fans eager to see a more faithful adaptation of the beloved game. International markets also contributed significantly, as the Silent Hill name carries global recognition. Critical reception focused heavily on tone, atmosphere, and emotional storytelling. Many reviewers praised the film for returning to psychological roots rather than relying on fast-paced action. Critics highlighted Jeremy Irvine's restrained performance and the symbolic presence of Pyramid Head. The deliberate pacing received mixed reactions. Some viewers appreciated the slow build and emotional weight, while others accustomed to jump-scare-heavy horror found it more subdued than expected. Audience reception tended to reflect generational differences. Fans of the Silent Hill 2 video game generally responded positively, appreciating the film's loyalty to character themes and symbolic storytelling. They noted the careful handling of Maria's dual identity and the emotional strength of the videotape reveal. Casual horror viewers, however, sometimes describe the film as heavy and emotionally intense rather than traditionally frightening. On review aggregation platforms, the film maintained moderate to strong ratings. Praise centered on cinematography, production design, and thematic depth. Criticism focused mainly on pacing and the ambiguity of the ending. Some viewers preferred clearer resolution, while others valued the open interpretation. Financially, the film performed solidly within the horror market. While it did not reach the blockbuster heights of large franchise horror universes, it demonstrated consistent performance across domestic and international markets. Merchandise sales, streaming rights, and home media releases contributed additional revenue beyond theatrical earnings. The film's connection to an iconic game franchise also boosted digital rental and collector edition sales. Industry analysts noted that the film's controlled budget allowed profitability without requiring extreme box office numbers. By balancing artistic ambition with financial discipline, the production avoided the risks associated with oversized budgets. This approach positioned the film as a successful mid-range genre release rather than a high-risk blockbuster gamble. Overall, Return to Silent Hill achieved respectable commercial success and strengthened the franchise's legacy. While not universally praised as a mainstream crowd-pleaser, it earned recognition for staying true to its psychological horror roots. Its financial performance and reception demonstrated that audiences remain interested in thoughtful, character-driven horror stories when supported by strong atmosphere and emotional authenticity. Return to Silent Hill is not a film designed for casual, one-time viewing. Its emotional depth, layered symbolism, and psychological storytelling give it strong rewatch value. While some horror films rely on surprise twists that lose impact after the first viewing, this movie becomes richer once the audience knows the truth behind James Sunderland's journey. In fact, understanding the ending enhances earlier scenes rather than diminishing them. On a first watch, viewers experience the story primarily as a mystery. The question of whether Mary is alive drives curiosity. The appearance of Maria creates confusion and emotional tension. The repeated encounters with Pyramid Head feel threatening but unclear in meaning. Much of the horror comes from uncertainty. However, once the videotape revelation exposes James's role in Mary's death, the entire narrative shifts in perspective. During a second viewing, many scenes take on new significance. Early moments that once seemed mysterious reveal themselves as symbolic hints. Pyramid Head's presence feels less like a random monster and more like an extension of James's conscience. Maria's dialogue, especially her subtle manipulations, becomes more transparent. Her lines often contain clues about James's guilt. Rewatching allows audiences to notice these details that may have been overlooked initially. The film's production design also rewards repeated viewing. Small visual cues, such as mirrors reflecting distorted images or rust spreading across walls, gain deeper meaning. The transformation sequences between the normal town and its darker version can be interpreted as stages of James's mental breakdown. On a second or third viewing, these visual shifts feel purposeful rather than simply atmospheric. The emotional takeaway of the film strengthens over time. On first watch, the videotape revelation shocks and unsettles. On rewatch, that scene becomes tragic rather than surprising. Viewers may focus more on James's expressions and body language, recognizing the weight of suppressed guilt. This shift from shock to empathy deepens the experience. Return to Silent Hill also invites philosophical reflection. The ambiguous ending encourages discussion. Did James truly find redemption, or is he still trapped? Each viewer may interpret his final fate differently. This open conclusion increases rewatch value because audiences may revisit the film searching for subtle hints that support one interpretation over another. The performances contribute strongly to repeat engagement. Jeremy Irvine's restrained portrayal of James contains subtle facial expressions and pauses that gain new meaning after understanding the full story. Hannah Emily Anderson's dual performance as Mary and Maria becomes even more impressive when viewers recognize the psychological purpose behind each variation in tone and body language. For horror fans, the film offers a different kind of satisfaction compared to fast-paced thrillers. Instead of relying on adrenaline, it delivers emotional resonance. Viewers who appreciate psychological horror often return to films that explore trauma and guilt because those themes feel timeless. The movie's emphasis on internal struggle makes it more relatable than purely supernatural horror. The audience takeaway centers on accountability and emotional honesty. The film suggests that confronting painful truth is necessary for growth. Avoiding guilt only strengthens its hold. This message remains relevant beyond the horror genre. Viewers may reflect on their own experiences with denial or suppressed emotion. The story encourages introspection rather than simple fear. Additionally, the layered symbolism allows academic and thematic analysis. Film students and horror enthusiasts may revisit scenes to examine visual metaphors, sound design choices, and narrative structure. The depth of interpretation supports long-term interest. Ultimately, Return to Silent Hill holds strong rewatch value because its horror is psychological rather than situational. The more viewers understand the story, the more they discover within it. Each viewing reveals additional emotional and symbolic layers. Rather than fading after its twist, the film grows more meaningful, offering lasting impact beyond its runtime. Return to Silent Hill is designed as a cinematic experience that benefits from immersive viewing conditions. Because the film relies heavily on atmosphere, sound design, and subtle visual details, how and where you watch it can significantly affect your experience. Whether viewed in theaters, at home, or through streaming platforms, choosing the right setup can enhance its psychological impact. At the time of its initial release, the film premiered in theaters, allowing audiences to experience the full scope of its sound and visual design. Watching it on a large screen amplifies the depth of the fog-filled landscapes and the scale of environments like the hospital and Lakeview Hotel. The theater sound system enhances the industrial rumbling of Pyramid Head's blade and the distant sirens that signal the town's transformation. For viewers who prefer a communal atmosphere, the theatrical experience intensifies tension through shared reactions and collective silence during key moments. After its theatrical run, the film became available through digital platforms. It can typically be rented or purchased through major video-on-demand services. Watching it digitally offers flexibility and convenience, allowing viewers to pause, rewind, and rewatch significant scenes. This format works especially well for those interested in analyzing symbolism or revisiting emotional moments. However, to preserve the film's intended atmosphere, it is recommended to watch it in high-definition format. Streaming services may also carry the film depending on regional licensing agreements. Availability can vary by country and platform. Subscribing to a service that offers high-quality streaming ensures that the subtle lighting and muted color palette remain clear. Because much of the film's visual detail exists in shadow and fog, lower resolution viewing may reduce its impact. For home viewing, the ideal setup includes a darkened room and a quality sound system or headphones. The film's sound design depends heavily on subtle background noises, distant echoes, and quiet dialogue. Watching in a noisy environment may reduce immersion. Headphones can be particularly effective because they isolate environmental sounds and enhance tension. Small audio details, such as faint metallic scraping or whispered dialogue, become more noticeable in controlled settings. Physical media options, such as Blu-ray or collector's editions, often provide the best picture and sound quality. These editions may include additional features such as behind-the-scenes footage, director commentary, or interviews with cast members. For dedicated fans, these extras offer insight into the creative process and deepen appreciation for the film's symbolism and design choices. Physical copies also ensure long-term access without relying on streaming availability. Because the film explores heavy emotional themes, viewers may prefer watching it alone or in a quiet setting. Unlike fast-paced horror films that encourage loud reactions, Return to Silent Hill benefits from concentration and reflection. The emotional weight of the videotape scene and final confrontation resonates more deeply when distractions are minimized. For those sensitive to intense psychological themes or disturbing imagery, it is advisable to check content ratings beforehand. The film includes violent sequences and emotionally challenging subject matter. Being aware of its tone helps viewers prepare for the experience. Ultimately, Return to Silent Hill is best watched in a way that respects its atmospheric design. A dark room, minimal distractions, and high-quality audio significantly enhance the emotional journey. Whether in theaters or at home, the key is immersion. The film invites viewers to step into the fog and remain there long enough to confront its deeper meaning. This completes all 23 headings in order, with the required structure and word counts. If you liked this video, Don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gripping movie explanations like this.